Welcome to Fossil Creek Tree Farm and Nursery. I'm Max. I'll be the garden coach today. Onions. We're going to talk about growing them. And of course, she's showing you the varieties. Texas Super Sweet, that's a great one. And Red Creole and Yellow Granites. And we're at that time of year. And first of all, I'll say this, and it may be out of order, but not to worry about cold. Onions will take temperatures well below freezing, so you can put that worry out of the way. It's time to plant, and a good time to start that would be 6 weeks before our last average frost. Right now, and of course our last average frost, which seems to be kind of meaningless in recent years because who knows when it's going to be, but that one typically occurs like March 15th or 20th. From those, we would be 8 or 9 weeks out. So, and to plant them 6 weeks before the last average one, we can do that now. The last average frost could be a lot earlier than those, but if we have really bad weather, it's not going to bother the onions. So we'll go through the details of how you can do it. And the first 3 things to say about growing onions are sun, sun, sun. They're a full sun item. You can't give them too much. Sunlight is food for onions. So, and of course, then we get into, and that's talking about placement. The next thing to get into is soil preparation. Onions would prefer a pH of 6.2 to 6.8. We tend to be a little more alkaline than that. So if you wanted to amend the soil, you could use Planters Mix would be good. It's got sphagnum peat in it, compost, and aged pine bark. So you mix that in. It'd be a good idea to cultivate the soil, that end of the soil, 8 to 10 inches deep. If you're doing raised beds, you want the soil in the bed to be at least 10 inches deep. As far as spacing is concerned, if you want the onions to grow to full size, you'd plant them 4 inches apart. If you wanted to eat some green onions and pick them kind of as you go along, you could plant them 2 inches apart, and you'll be taking every other one to eat as green onions. If you're going to be planting in a big pot, you'd plant the onions 3 inches apart. And the depth, here we go. Let me find one. We've got a volunteer. 3/4 of an inch deep, an inch at the most. Deeper is not better. If you plant it more than an inch, you're going to have a problem. So, about that much onion in the ground. So that's about 3/4 of an inch, and that'll do it. Now when you plant it like that, it's going to look like it's kind of shallow. That's what you're shooting for. And let's see. In fact, it says specifically not more than an inch deep. So, and like I said, 3 inches apart, 3 to 4 inches apart. Don't reverse that. If you plant them 3 inches deep, 3/4 of an inch apart, well, you just wasted your time and killed some onions. So, fertilizing, depending on if you're using synthetic or organic. Synthetic, like a 2100 or a 15510, 2 to 3 pounds over 100 square feet. If you're doing organic, it'll be 5 to 8 pounds over the 100 square feet. And you would mix that into the top 3 or 4 inches of soil. When the onion plants have at least 6 leaves, you can fertilize again. And that you would just lightly scratch into the top inch of soil. And for the second application, you would use a 1/2 cup of synthetic or 1.5 cups of organic fertilizer for each 10-foot row. And by the time, if the onions are starting to bulb, all fertilizer is off. You can probably get by with those 2 fertilizers. Watering in spring, probably ballpark once a week. And since you've cultivated the soil, that will dramatically help, and incorporated some organic material, that will help on the main thing and that is the water penetrating the soil. If you haven't cultivated, our soil tends to be hard clay and compacted. You have a hard time for the 2 things. You have a hard time for the moisture to penetrate, and of course when it penetrates, it takes that fertilizer down to the root area, and also you want to have a looser soil to make easy time of it for the roots of the onions to grow vigorously. And on that, our little presentation note here has a neat deal in there that they have and as far as watering is concerned, they have the knuckle rule. And that is, if you think, should I water or not, you put your finger into the soil to your first knuckle. If it's dry to that depth, it's time to water. But, you know, as with all things, typically, unless it's a swamp plant, moderate soil moisture. You don't get extra points for keeping them extra wet. That would typically discourage them. Of course, keep weeds out of there because they compete. And typically, if you're watering them on time and you're keeping the weeds out of the way, pests are few and far between. If you add some pests, neem oil is probably a good treatment for them. It's antifungal and to a degree an insecticide. Okay, now we're on to harvesting. You're planting them now. In the next few weeks, you'll begin getting onions May through July, depending on how quick they go. If you're growing them to maturity, then they're gonna be ready when the stems weaken and fall. And then of course at that point you can pull them, get underway. Don't plant them too deep, and a little bit of fertilizer, and you'll be successful. Thanks for tuning in.